brick. It's one of the earlier areas in the game, and so we've just finished that. We just cleared one of the bosses, right?
Yes, we did.
And so if you've kind of been following our footage, you've seen this kind of like giant ice beast. He's called, what's his name?
Volt.
Volt, yeah.
Volt.
And so we've just finished him, and we're going to take a look right now over the area of the game. So we're going to take a look.
Yes.
And you can see the camera kind of pans out, and you're looking.
Wow, I love that landscape.
Yeah, you're looking at some of the, pretty much all the areas that you can go, anywhere you can see, you can go to.
So that's all gameplay mapped areas. That's not a painted background that we're seeing.
Yes.
No, all this is places you'll experience in the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to raise the banner, and there is a cutscene. If you've been following our footage, where the cutscene's not here because we've already cleared this area, but if you kind of watch some of the other footage out there, you can see the cutscene. It kind of reminds you of some other scenes that have happened in previous Dark Souls games, so you kind of start to make some of those connections. We can't talk exactly, what the kind of lore intertwining is going to be, but there are definitely callbacks to previous Dark Souls games.
Now, I noticed that this Dark Souls, now, ambience is everything in a Souls game. This game itself, to me, looks like it's got some of the color palette that we see in Bloodborne. Now, do you consider that as inspiration drawn as well for Dark Souls 3?
From Software has worked on a lot of different games over the last like 5 or 6 years, and they're building on every single one of them. These are more, we're definitely following more in the lines of Dark Souls, and then Bloodborne. Bloodborne is kind of like a different game. It's published by Sony. It's not by us. But From Software has, this game is faster than some of the other Dark Souls games. So there are things that you see that the team has incorporated from other projects.
Okay. Now, when it comes to Dark Souls, when the fan base is very unique in that we love to struggle.
You say we because that's you're part of them.
We love to die. We love to struggle.
Sure.
It's spending hours on boss attempts on high New Game Plus difficulties and things like that. Where do you see the challenge of Dark Souls 3 coming into play? Like, if you could say its challenges on tier with a previous Souls game, which one would you say it closely resembles?
I would the director of the game is going to be Miyazaki, Hidetaka Miyazaki, who directed Dark Souls 1. He's back at the helm of Dark Souls 3, and the way he explains it is that Dark Souls 3 has more and unique challenges, because as you go through your game, people kind of learn, I kind of like need to do this to get around certain bosses, or certain enemies I sneak up behind, try to hit the backstab. So the team tries to give you more challenges, more unique ways. There's all sorts of things that happen in the game where you're just like, whoa, I can't believe that the enemy attacked me like that, or I didn't see that coming. But Hidetaka Miyazaki also talks about how the player has more tools in their belt this time. So one thing that's new with Dark Souls 3, which we can show off right now, is you see the health bar, the FP meter, and your stamina. So the FP meter is the blue meter, which you'll use for spells and abilities. So weapon skills. So every weapon has an extra ability attached to it now that you can kind of use that meter to attack it. So Nick's going to try it right now. So we're using a Lucerne, which is sort of like hammer spear sort of thing. And by holding L2 on a PlayStation controller, you can do different attacks.
You can see I love what I'm seeing here. You only took like 1 or 2 attacks and it nearly killed you. So it's the punishment factor is still very much alive and well.
Yep. And right now we're kind of low level, right? We kind of try to rush the game a little bit to get to this area so we can show this off. So. And just like previous Souls games, if you collect all these souls, you can choose to use them to upgrade your equipment. You can choose them to level yourself up. You can choose to buy new stuff. So it's really up to you how you progress through the game.
Now, when it comes to leveling up and in your soul level and all that, do we have the same stats to level from previous Soul games? Or are there any unique attributes that we don't know about yet?
We can look at the menu right now. The different stats. They are very similar to. Probably the stats are probably most similar to Dark Souls 1. Maybe. Okay. But there is the new luck stat, which was not in.
I don't believe it was there.
Right. So you can hover over. We can take a look and.
I don't suppose we get to know exactly how that works.
Well,
do we?
We'll tell you what the game says.
Okay.
So we get on to luck. So item discovery,
Yep.
and some resistances. And you will find some things later in the game, whether it's a weapon or a spell, that luck may affect more than others.
And you can level that on level up.
Sure.
So we don't get to know what percent it increases by. So it could be like only +1 for 50 points deep into this.
Sure.
Maybe.
And it's nothing. I don't think it's that harsh. But yeah, there is a little bit of a mystery to it.
But it does do something.
It does do something.
Okay. We have on record. Luck does something.
And
people.
I would say that item discovery, my personal experience, item discovery is really great in this game. Like early on, like
Yes.
you meet
That makes me happy.
Yeah, you meet
That
some
makes me so
knights that
happy.
have some cool armor and some cool weapons. And if you have some item discovery, you have a chance to pick those up.
That's part of the essence of with the Souls fans, though. I mean, people who play through the game, then play through again. Like, what am I going to do this time?
Yeah.
I'm going to do a strength build. I'm going to do a dex
Yep.
build. I'm going to do a mirror knight
Ooh, nice.
cosplay. I'm going to do.
We just threw a
Ooh.
firebomb and blew up a pile of enemies.
Jeez.
Do we have
No
another
more.
firebomb?
Now how useful will like items like that be as you get into higher level? Like sometimes people use them for pulling, some people use them for combat.
What's really cool in this game is whether it's I like that. Whether it's throwing knives or a bow attack. Like a lot of things are a lot more viable and can happen quicker. So you'll see that throwing knives, you can throw them a lot faster than you can other games. Like you can just throw them in quick succession.
I love these enemies.
With the weapon arts or the weapon skills, like the bow, you can fire multiple times really quickly with a certain bow.
Yeah.
Other bow, you can fire 3 arrows at one time. So there's a lot more tools that you have at your disposal to use with some of the weapons.
So it sounds like basically you're just back on the table.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved Bloodborne, but the biggest thing that I wanted more loot. I'm someone that would grind up just to complete the cost and complete the outfit.
Yeah, and we would say that Dark Souls 3 is a lot more like Dark Souls 1 and 2 than Bloodborne, but there's tons of, how many different weapons did we say? There was a number.
There's like 200.
Oh yeah, 200 different weapons in the game, and those all have their own, and some of them have the same weapon skills, but there's a lot of really unique ones where it's like, I can use this weapon and do this really cool special thing. Do you want to try to equip a different weapon so we can show off some of the other
axe here?
There we go.
So with the axes, you kind of do a step forward, and you will have a short period of time of increased damage and stamina regeneration.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the setting exactly where Dark Souls 3 takes place?
We can
Are
answer
allowed to talk about that?
It's so there are connections to Dark Souls 1 and 2 in this game.
To both of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we don't, it's really hard to talk about those because that's part of the fun and the mystery of the game.
You got to find out for yourself, I understand.
Whether you're looking at item descriptions and you recognize a name or something, that's what's kind of special about the game. So we want to kind of tease people and say, yep, they're connected, it's cool, there's a lot of stuff in there, but we also want to hit the fact that Dark Souls 3 is just a fun game. If you've never played Dark Souls games before, that's not a big deal. Like it's just a good game. It's a lot of fun.
It's a good game to play.
If you don't understand the story or the background, that's totally okay.
Now, the story of Dark Souls confuses a lot of people at times.
Sure.
And so, what is the vehicle for delivering the story this time around Dark Souls 3? Are we going to be finding more of the lore from those bits and pieces from equipped items, NPCs?
I would say the NPCs in Dark Souls 3 do a little better job of communicating some of that story to you, but it's still the very similar viewpoint where there's a story to the game. If you want to experience it, it's there. You can read about it, and you can hear some of the NPCs talk about it, but if you don't want to experience it, it's totally fine. You don't need to know what's going on to fight the next boss.
Awesome.
It's an extra layer for people. Oh, you put on a nice little hat there.
Oh,
There's a nice little hat there. Look at that. He put on his wizard hat and robe.
It's a nice piece there for people who want to engage in that part. And we've seen our fans over the years really do like engaging in that, and it's been great.
So let's talk about post-game for a little bit.
Sure.
One thing that we really love is New Game Plus when it comes to our Souls games. Are we going to get that same experience with Dark Souls 3? Is there a New Game Plus component to it?
There is a New Game Plus, similar to other Dark Souls games.
Is it scaled at +7?
We don't want to say anything about that yet.
Okay. All right.
The team is aware of how some people like to play the game, and there's a lot of things in there, whether it's New Game Plus or whether it's multiplayer, that they have a lot of special surprises in store. But all of that stuff, if you've played these Dark Souls games, you know that the first day it launches, it's so exciting just to run out there and figure out what it's all about.
It's a totally new world.
We really don't want to spoil it. You'll see Nick just used another new part of Dark Souls 3, which is
Ashen Estus
Flask. So that refills the blue meter, the FP meter, to use more weapon skills or spells. And do we want to go back to Firelink Shrine?
Sure,
pretty
we
soon?
can head it back over
So
Firelink Shrine.
Firelink Shrine is, you'll recognize the name of that.
I think I heard of that part of the game before.
So that is, there is a Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 3, so we will head back there to take a look at our stats. You can level up. We can upgrade some different things there.
Now, I know you said that we don't want to spoil anything.
Sure.
But with the nod to previous games, will we see any lesser, major, or boss characters, without naming any, from any previous games?
Specifically bosses, or...
Okay, everyone wants to know about boss. Okay, what's the boss question?
Sure. Well, let's say if we include, whether it's bosses, NPCs, characters, will you see some of those people?
We'll see one come out real fast.
We'll see one coming up real fast, actually.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
There will be things and people, but then again, if you have never heard of this person that we're about to meet, that's totally fine. Like,
it's a person, ladies and gentlemen. It's a person we're about to encounter.
That's fine. It's a game that takes place where you can equip some maces and some swords and go kill some bosses. It's just a lot of fun.
Terrific. Now, one of the things that I really liked about the previous Souls game was if you basically could think up a challenge, you could try it.
Sure.
And probably succeed if you had enough tenacity to do it.
Sure.
Will we be able to see Soul level 1 runs or bonfireless, or I'm assuming Deathless will be possible if you're that sort of
so there is a level 1
punishment.
character. The Deprived starts at a level 1, so you choose from a different classes when you start the game. So the Deprived level 1 is one of them. So if you wanna go for that, you totally can.
But what about staying Soul level 1 the whole way through?
Sure. If that's what you if that's how you want to punish yourself, that's totally fine. So Andre the Blacksmith.
Yeah.
You probably remember him from Dark Souls 1. Why is he here? How is he here? We
don't know.
We're not.
And we're
can't
not.
say.
Well, you know, but we don't get to know. We don't get to know.
Because it would be less fun if we if you threw all this out there right away. So this is where you can level up your weapons and your equipment. And so if you want to look at a lot Estus.
Yes.
So this goes back to like the different builds that you want to make.
You have to split that.
Yeah. So if you have a warrior, just has some heavy armor and a big sword, you're using all regular Estus flasks to heal up. If you want to be like a sorcerer or a caster, or you want to use a lot of weapon skills, you can move more over to the Ashen. So there's a lot of space for different builds.
Okay. Can we talk about how magic works?
Sure.
In the game?
Yeah.
Is there any fundamental differences? Does it run the same? Is it going to be familiar to people, or is it totally different?
It is very familiar to people. It's very similar. But just like with a sword or a whip, every weapon or piece of equipment every weapon has a weapon skill. So if you go into your inventory, Nick, and take a look at just look at the description. So it tells you the skill right there. So
skill
it says
stance.
So while in stance, use normal attack. So with a longsword, you kind of hold it up in a ready position.
Okay.
And then you can do different attacks from there.
Now
so with a wand or a catalyst or a staff, those all have their own skills as well.
Now, how many weapons in the game have a skill associated with them?
Everyone.
Everyone has a skill.
Yeah.
Now, is it general, like long swords and short swords will have stance, or?
So there's some of that, but as you progress further into the game, you find more and more unique stuff.
That has unique abilities. I love it.
So. Ooh.
What was that?
So I think Nick's holding a crossbow right now, and the stance is that if you're holding a crossbow and you're going to shoot people, maybe somebody's getting up in your face, you can just shoulder bash them.
Shoulder bash them.
Yeah.
Keep them at bay. Okay.
Yes.
It's very cool. So we can go back into the world and see we have a longsword +1. We're getting there.
There you go.
But we are pretty excited because the game's looking really good. There's a lot of really cool stories that you experience through the NPCs and just the item descriptions. The weapons, the new weapons and armor sets are always exciting, but we're really excited to get it out there. We've only over the last couple weeks been able to show off this game for the first time. Before we've just been kind of telling people to wait, hold on.
Yes.
I mean, this is one of those games that everybody wants to know about.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the biggest anticipated releases of the year.
Yeah.
So soon into the year too, and keeping that under wraps must be
It's
almost
really
a
hard.
chore. Like it must be like you just want. Like, I would want to talk about this.
Yep, and we really do, and that's why we have to kind of try to play as much as we can behind closed doors, and then kind of get our fix in. So A, we love playing the game ourselves, and B, we have to try to know what we're talking about because these games are so deep and there's so much going on. But our big thing with here we go. We're in our stance right now. So
Ooh.
so you have a couple different attacks. We can probably just try to progress. I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully we might be able to
See how far we get.
see a boss here, but we're not eventually.
I love that you're wearing the quintessential Dark Souls armor too for this demonstration.
Yeah, it's you know, you can make you can start with a thief, you can start with a deprived, you can start with a sorcerer. Sometimes it's easier at the beginning just to use a knight class. You have the heavy armor and an
I always used to start that way, but now whenever I do, it's got to be deprived.
yeah.
Every time. I like putting my stats where they can go.
Yeah, no, but we're excited. I mean, especially with a lot of the other games from Software's been putting out, there's more and more people interested in Dark Souls for the first time, which is great for us. We don't want to. There are challenging things about this game, but some of it's kind of you can make it as challenging as you want to make it.
Right, or as easy even. And one of the things that I've always liked about Dark Souls as a franchise is that it's a game that's so fun to play, but it can be just as fun to watch.
Yeah. Yep.
It
does really well on Twitch.
it does really, really well on Twitch, yes. And it's because it can be speed run,
Yep.
it can be boss challenges, you can do cosplays, you can do Soul Level 1, Deathless, Bonfireless, all this. There's so many ways to do replayability.
Getting the torch
It's a
out.
little dark in here.
Now, that's something too. Dark Souls 2 was supposed to be a bit darker. I understand, have more torch mechanics.
Yeah, I mean the
implemented
game,
into it.
and that's why it's funny. That's why showing off footage earlier and earlier. Some developers don't want to do as much because like the game changed a lot in development, and so yeah, I think earlier on there were a lot darker areas, and you had to maybe even more areas that you had to choose between a shield or a torch. And
Yep.
then in the final version of the game, there was a couple areas like that, but it wasn't as intense or as maybe originally planned.
So how important to Dark Souls 3 would you say is the aspect of light? Having a torch or a lantern or being able to stay in the light?
I would say medium. First of all, you're going to meet a couple of these enemies that have red eyes.
Red eyes. So what are they?
They're just a little tougher, a little more aggressive. They have a little more health.
Are they the new like Red Invaders?
These are no. There's not. That's different. There
Okay.
definitely are invaders that will come
Okay.
in like NPC invaders. You see
I
these
love
guys.
these character designs.
Yeah. These guys are really still until you walk up and they try to grab you.
So obviously this is a little bit of a spoiler right now,
Sure.
but for someone who was just walking into this, I see like that these ones aren't moving. Are those actual enemies?
So those are not enemies right there.
So they
isn't.
they trick you into,
Yes.
into getting
So-
nearby.
There we go. So you have to sometimes, and it's the same thing with chess. If you've played like
I
Dark
was,
Souls 1 and 2,
going to ask about mimics, but I
mimics.
wasn't going to ask about mimics.
And I mean, like we're not going to say anything about mimics, but
Might be here.
if you've played Dark Souls before, you kind of have a habit of like attacking chess before you try to open
You start
it.
like looking at like
Yep.
the chain that connects the chest. Is it moving a little bit?
Yep. So that's, and I would say there's even more things that might jump out at you in this game.
Terrific.
We're going to meet an NPC. Is that? It's like that one guy up there.
I believe he's up here, yeah.
So
Ember restored.
Yeah, so there's no, in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2, there's a certain item to put you into human mode.
Yep.
Human.
Humanity
Right.
and your human effigies.
Yep. So in this game, it's called Ember.
Okay.
So you use embers to go back into human form.
So you do go hollow in this when you die.
And
Sort of. It works a little bit different.
Okay.
yeah.
But people find out when they play the game, but
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to speak to the exact lore implications of all of it, but when you do use an ember, you restore your ember form and you have more max health. So,
Okay.
but after you die once,
You get
you'll
the
lose.
degrading.
It doesn't
health pool?
it doesn't continuously degrade. It just has that one degradation. These guys are always hanging from the rafters, and they're quite annoying. But you will see, you do have embers, and you
Whip
choose
hype.
when to use them or not. And you'll see the kind of graphical effect that has on your character. The different kind of coals and embers flying off of them.
So For Dark Souls 3, is it going to be released as a total standalone? Do you guys have any plan to potentially implement DLC down the line?
So for the
that was a hat trick you guys pulled on us for Dark
this
Souls
is
2.
one
We
of
were
the-
told never ever.
yeah.
We were told never ever.
This is one of the first times that we actually are confirming DLC at launch, right? So we don't. It's there. We have a season pass that's going out with the game.
Okay.
So with the season pass.
Now that guy tried. Wow. And he follows you. Great.
And you're actually getting hit by his mace causes a bleed damage. So you
effect,
see that meter beating.
Is that the guy that? Oh, he didn't have a mace earlier. He tried grabbing you with the book.
Yeah. He'll cast spells. He's actually pretty creepy. Like he'll chant and try to give you a big fire hug.
Now I'm not to detract from the progress of the game, but what happens if you do get fire hugged?
It's a lot of damage.
It's a lot of damage.
There's the fire.
No, don't show us! You have to show us! Oh no! Well, you survived at least. He just gently puts you down.
Yep. Okay.
He's nice about that at least.
It's a she,
No,
right?
Yeah. Who's the she?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was curious.
Yep. It is a she.
I
We
see
found that out by-
gracefully dodging around the whole time and just hugless going on.
Let's
Had
see
to
what
get that going.
happens.
That'll happen. And I don't think there's any enemies. There's not too many enemies in Dark Souls you want to grab you, whether it's a boss or.
Yeah, you don't want to be grabbed by anything.
There's plenty of bosses that will try to grab you. You try to avoid that at all times. Should we try to? I'm not sure how much time we have. Should we try to get to the boss?
Right to get to the. If I get.
Nick's struggling with this.
No, that was.
It's a hard game for everyone.
Yeah, and with Dark Souls, it's not like if you took your time and just slowly worked enemy by enemy, it's manageable.
Yep.
But if you decide, like, oh, I want to move a little faster, I want to get by these guys, I can kill these guys, no problem.
Like I want to get to a boss really fast.
I want to get to the boss really fast.
It gets a lot more challenging, and a couple normal enemies can just cut you up real fast.
Now, how? I don't want to use the word important or relevant, but when I played Dark Souls 1,
Sure.
I quickly realized that stripping down naked and rolling was the way to go because I couldn't like wield my armor proficiently enough. Now, when it comes to this game, how important is armor going to be for negating damage versus just being straight up fashion? Like how obviously you never want to get hit.
Yeah.
But like how much more important is it to roll in Dark Souls 3 versus maybe tank it, maybe be a little less agile?
I would say as From Software progressed, they are very aware of how some people just roll through the game.
Yep.
And so you'll find enemies that will chase you further. You'll find enemies that will block a doorway. You'll find enemies who maybe hit even harder than normal, and just getting hit once while you're not protected is a little more painful.
Right.
So I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I think you're dissuaded from that a little more in this game.
Now, is that why we saw like far more aggressive gameplay in, say, Bloodborne? We're trying to get people out of the mentality that you can just be invincible.
I don't think they want to change anybody's way of playing. They just want to make sure that there's. It's once you played a Dark Souls game before, you get the feeling like, oh, I know what to expect. I know how this works. They want to keep on surprising you. They want to keep on giving you reasons to stop and think what's around that next corner. Is this where the pot men are? Are we going to find the pot men?
You may find
the pot men.
Pot men.
They're men that carry, or they're guys that carry on large
They
pots.
look like
around that,
the enemies from Dark Souls 1. The ones that are always like holding their heads and.
Yes. So, you're getting firebombs thrown at us. But this area is called Undead Settlement, right?
Okay.
And it is the first area after you fight in like in the tower. It's called the High Wall of Lothric, and you go through that area. You fight a boss, and then you get kind of flown down to where we were kind of looking over the big world.
Okay.
And this is the kind of the first area in that big world. And so that's where the really interconnected world starts to take into effect. Early on, there's a tutorial area in the High Wall of Lothric, but then once you kind of come down to the Undead Settlement, that's when the world really starts to wrap on top of itself and interconnect to other areas. Which a lot of people appreciate from like Dark Souls 1 games, where you find a big shortcut that opens it up. And you're like, oh, I'm here.
I'm here now.
Yeah. And so you'll see that more in Dark Souls 3. The hub is separate, Firelink Shrine. You kind of teleport to and from there, but
So the fast travel aspect is still in the game?
yep.
Okay.
Right from the beginning, you can fast travel.
Can you do it freely, or do you have a currency that you need to be able to
You
travel?
can do it freely.
Do it freely.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the bonfires are kind of designed around that. We found a friend over here.
Who's this?
So you'll meet people throughout the world, whether they're going to help you by pyromancies or sorceries, or they have special quests, or maybe they're not too bright, or they're not too, cool and good, but they'll go back to Firelink Shrine after you talk to them out in the world.
Okay.
And then you can
so
kind
sort of like Majula.
Sure.
With
yep.
that. Okay.
And you can kind of progress their storylines from there. Almost all the NPCs have their own storyline that you can kind of talk, and they go do different things throughout the world, and that's kind of up to you on how deep you want to go into that.
Now,
here's the pot man.
Ooh.
So similar, a lot of Dark Souls enemies, big guy like this, you would just try to run around behind him and stab him in the back.
Right.
He has a big board on his back to protect him from that.
You can't do that. He's got the turtle armor on.
Yep. So he's actually pretty
What's
tough.
in that pot?
Yo,
Jeez.
he hits you pretty hard, and if you go too far, he'll throw it at you.
Yeah, does it disarm him, or does he pull out another?
He pulls out a different weapon that's even a little scarier. I think it's a giant machete.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe get him to throw it at you. Or just get smacked by it.
Don't sate my curiosity. you can win.
And you can see the rolls are a little faster in this game,
yep.
and it depends on how much armor you're equipping. There are break points, whether it's 70%.
70%.
So it's like
So
every...
are there tiers of rolling, like before you
Yep.
get to the actual
Yep.
like fat rolling, as we
Yep.
call it?
Yeah, for people who don't know, you play Dark Souls, every, whether you put on a helmet or a piece of armor, it all weighs something, and then
Right.
and you can upgrade a stat that lets you carry more, but it's kind of up to you how you balance that.
Now, if you load yourself up on super heavy armor and you pick up great sword and all that, does your encumbrance ever get to the point where it's actually difficult to walk and move?
It gets to a point where you can't roll. you
Can't even roll at all.
No, your guy will like stop.
Yeah.
He'll like get ready and like throw his back out.
Yep. We might. I don't know if we have enough heavy armor right now to show that off, but it definitely gets to be too much at some point. Are we? Okay, we're getting close.
Other side of
Now
this.
is power stancing back in?
So there
builds?
is no power stancing, but there are weapons where you'll find it in dual wield. So if people don't know, if you're holding a weapon with one hand, you can press triangle and you hold it with two hands.
Right.
But there are weapons now in the game where they're specifically made for dual wielding. So you'll have it, and it's like a mace, and then you press triangle and you pull it, and it's two maces. And those will have a special attack set.
And it's got its own kit for that.
Yep. And so
Awesome.
you definitely can dual wield. You can pick to have one sword in this hand, another sword in that hand. But there are special weapon sets that will let you dual wield and do special attacks and stuff from that.
Now let's say I don't have one of those specific weapon sets.
Yep.
Are there interactions between weapons that do not go together?
You can use them both.
Okay.
If you want, but
So we can still dual wield greatswords, is what you're saying, if we want to.
I believe.
Sure,
maybe
greatswords.
Greatswords. We'll have to check.
Okay. Okay.
We'll have to check on that one, because it's a blend between Dark Souls 1 and 2, the kind of dual wielding system. But it is really cool to see some of the weapons that it's not the exact same. Maybe it's like a mismatch, like it's dual katanas we
Like
showed
right
off
now, yeah.
yesterday, right? So it's dual katanas. One of them's like a really short dagger, and one of them's a big katana. And then you dual wield them, and they have a really cool different attack type.
Awesome.
So we have some big rats that we're trying to get past right now.
Whoa.
That's another thing. It's a very Dark Souls thing to have where you're walking down a path. It's very foggy. You don't really know exactly what's coming out of that fog, and then a giant rat.
And then a
runs
giant
at you.
skeleton kicks you off
Yep,
the cliffside
Exactly.
in your blind spot.
So we found a bonfire, which is good.
I love seeing the bonfire back in.
Oh,
Excellent.
yeah. Are you dual wielding right now?
Dual wielding right
Nice.
now. Got axes and long swords.
So
Okay.
we don't have too much more time. We can
Try and get to this boss.
we can try to run to the boss. We'll see if we make it.
All right. Speed running time.
One thing
See
you
that
will
evasion.
find, and I think we're about to come up on it, is a lot of different things will happen with the environment as you're progressing through. Right now, there's an archer in a tower. I think you
Okay.
can see him. I don't know if you can look up and see him.
Oy.
Whoa, there's the guy with a machete.
That looks like a lumberjack saw.
Yeah. So
Jeez.
there's a guy up in a tower, and he's going to start shooting these giant arrows that are stuck all over the place. Oh, there it is. And he's going to start firing these. So you have to not only try to get by the enemies, but you try to walk
Wow,
by
that
these
was some
arrows too.
fancy footwork right
Oh
there.
yeah, Nick's rolling now.
Now, will
right.
these? Now, you said these enemies will chase you longer if you try to do what we're doing just now.
Yeah.
Will they pass between zone lines? Like, if you get to a bonfire, will they vanish? Will if
The
you get to a boss
bonfire
zone-
will, as long as they're not right on top of you, the bonfire will reset everything.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, when it's saying enemies chase you, it's just a little more than you'd expect.
Right.
So I think we're really close to the boss room right now, which I'm glad we made it.
Excellent. No pressure now.
No,
by the
yeah.
way.
Oh, it's
now,
gonna
have you
be-
seen this boss before in any of your previous gameplay?
Some people may have seen this boss before in our previous gameplay, but not too many people have seen like how we walk in the entrance and maybe the cinematic that will. Is there
Right.
cinematic or
No,
no?
I don't think so.
this-
It just
sometimes
pops
in
off.
and one thing in Dark Souls 3 is where you just walk in and you get the feeling something's going on here. You know, there's no fog door right away. You're like,
it's a big room.
there's a big empty room. There's a lot of space here. There's a giant ugly tree,
Cursed and rotted great wood. Wow.
and all of a sudden,
Wait a
the thing
minute.
gets
He looks familiar, somewhat.
So
Now, are these enemies right here part of the boss encounter, or are they like
they are
trap
part of the
mobs?
well, a little of both.
A
They're-
little of both.
They
Okay.
will spawn throughout.
Oh,
He
man.
as he runs and attacks.
Now, the first thing I noticed immediately watching this boss fight, it definitely pays more homage to Dark Souls 1 than 2. Dark Souls 2, we had a lot of huge juggernauts and heavy armor that were humanoids, and this is clearly a monster.
This is
It's the
there
same
is a lot
monster.
of monsters in Dark Souls 1. The boss design is varied. You will see a lot of different stuff.
Not doing much damage to him either. That's his weak spot right there. The tank nest.
Yep.
Yeah.
As we'll appropriately call it right
So
now.
I think with this guy and this guy and some other bosses, you'll find if you hit their weak spot enough, maybe it'll do a chunk of damage, or maybe you'll stagger them for a bit.
Yeah.
Or you can do a little more damage. Oh, we're
And dead.
oh